My name is Sean Carson, and I'd like to tell you about a web quest I designed for 6th through 8th grade students that focuses on poetic forms throughout history. Groups of students will research and analyze poetic forms throughout history before crafting their own original poem and performing it in front of the class. The web quest was designed to meet California's state standard for English and Language Arts and Literacy 8.3.1 to determine and articulate the relationship between the purposes and characteristics of different forms of poetry like ballads, lyrics, sonnets, odes, and elegies. I start students off with a brief description about how long the history of poetry has been going on for, giving examples of like Homeric epics of 750 BC up into hip-hop-inspired slam poetry that's performed in coffee houses today. I describe how each generation has found its own unique voice through poetry and challenge the students to find their own as well with this upcoming project. In the tasks section, I set out exactly what they're going to do. Alongside their group, they're going to select one style of poetry, like those I mentioned before, sonnets, ballads, odes, etc., and find 3 more examples of that using a school library and online resources. They're going to then use a database to research and find an article that critiques or analyzes this style. The group will then annotate each of their 3 examples that they've found to highlight specific points which exemplify the style, what makes it fit into that form exactly. Finally, the group will then create their own original poem in that same style, which will be performed in front of the class. There's an option if they want to include music, props, or any other sort of performance aids in their presentation as well. The process just outlines their task in a little bit more detail. We're going to start off, and I will provide a classroom lecture with a lot of background information, key poetic figures, and we will be reading 3 poems in class together. Sonnet 18 by Shakespeare, Southey and Wordsworth from Don Juan by George Gordon or Lord Byron, and Ode to Aphrodite by Sappho. We'll then, as a class, go through and highlight these poems just like I will be asking students to do on their own in their groups. I provide several different links to get more information about the different poetic forms and how they've evolved through history and been used by different poets, as well as links on how to write poetry, biographies about poets, and so on. Then I describe how I will be assigning groups the next day in class. And each group will have a day or 2 to go home and do some independent research and come back and decide which style that they want to pursue for the project. Here I provide links to JSTOR and EBSCOhost, 2 very large online databases where they can choose their scholarly article that critiques or analyzes their chosen style. Finally, they'll be given some class time to compose their original poems before performing them later. On the evaluation page, I outline what I'm looking for each of the different steps of the process that I just outlined. So I'm going to be grading on notes on the original lecture that I give, their research that's done independently prior to the group formation, the research that's done as a group, and then their final poem composition and performance. Altogether, it'll be worth 45 points. In the conclusion, I urge students to continue to explore different forms of poetry that they may not have chosen or that may not have been covered by another group in the class, and of course to continue writing on their own. because again, poetry is a way for anyone to find their own unique voice. And I think it's a very valuable tool that I hope students will take away from this project.